Real small group, informal tonight. Some of our folks are still upstairs in the School Advisory Council meeting. So I'm kind of just talking about how we chose American Paradigm to run this school and some of the changes it affect. I lived around here over 25, nearly 30 years ago, and it was a junior high school then. It says Jones Junior High outside. It became a middle school later when the school district decided that's what they were doing. But when I lived here, it was called Jones Junior Jailhouse. And at the time, I worked as a 24th District Youth Aid Panels, which is like volunteers that work to mentor kids.
Okay.
And of course, it was right around the corner from the school and whatever, we had this like pile of kids here that had records like you wouldn't believe. So it was like so fitting, you had all these juvenile delinquents, and we called it Jones Junior Jailhouse. Joe Murphy was the vice principal then. And Susan Kalish, or Miss Kaplan Kalish, we used to call her Miss Kaplish because she had two names. The youth aid panel officer here now in the 24th District, Cynthia Padua, said to us, like, they're going to have a hard time changing that school. Most of the cases I get come from that school. Well, right, but if you change that attitude and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, you won't have those kids even getting that first arrest. Forget recidivism, they won't get into the system to begin with. And, you know, the school here was just terrible. 2 weeks before the end of school, there was such an uprising out here that adults came in the front door. They hit the school police officer, and they were able to get their fist in the door and even hit the principal, and then they were somehow bum rushed the door and they were in the building and whatever. But the school district put the spin on it, and Action News even reported that 4 adults attempted to enter the school and the principal stopped them. We were here as the School Advisory Council because we were here recruiting parents to serve on the council. The schoolyard was full of police. The chopper was in the air. We had police coming, lights and sirens. We practically had a SWAT team out there.
Well, that
but the spin was
recently,
that
right?
4 adults attempted to enter the school, but the principal stopped them. In reality, the adults were in the school, and they put this school on lockdown until they got in here and got them, and they arrested 2 students. One of the mothers was outside and was getting in one of the police officers' faces, and they were cool and calm and whatever else, and they said, ma'am, your daughter's under arrest. You can come and retrieve her from the police station later. And that evening was the captain's town hall meeting. So the mother comes there, and she's beefing with the officers and whatever. While she was beefing with these officers outside, she put her hands on a lady police officer. She shoved her. And they didn't lock her up. When she came to retrieve her daughter and all this, like, how dare you arrest my daughter, and blah, 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 and all this, they went, ma'am, turn around, put your hands behind your back. You're under arrest for assaulting an officer. It's 0 tolerance. Got it. So the mom, the daughter, it was just a hot mess. But the principal that was here denied any of that. Oh, it was a small fight. There were a couple of kids. You got a shiner. The school police officer's on the ground picking himself up, and it was a small incident. So when you tolerate that and accept that, that's what you're going to have.
Right.
Hello, how are you? Yep, Michael Blackie. We're Facebook friends. I'm H.L. Mencken. Nice to meet you, finally. Thank you. So, well, for the little audience that we have, let's get started. We are the Port Richmond West Community Action Network. We began roughly about September the 28th of last year in relation to 3 shootings, 2 homicides in this neighborhood right down the street from the school on Ann Street. There was just a constant thing going on over drugs and territory and whatever, and a young mother was shot and killed. And then there was a retaliation shooting on the heels of that. We were in the planning stages. Doug and myself and some other neighborhood members were starting to get together to talk about forming a community organization to start to do some of these things in the community, and a shooting occurred on that afternoon, as well as the overflow from another fight here at Jones Middle School that poured out on Tulip Street. We heard the gunshots and thought it was in relation to the violence from the school, and here they were 2 separate but equal incidents. While all the neighbors were out in the street and police were handling everything, Sandy over here, who's my favorite best friend and all-time block captain, was running around telling people, there's a meeting at the bar tonight, there's a meeting at the bar tonight. And we met in a little corner bar called the Port Richmond Poorhouse. 65 people poured into this little bar, and they were hot, and they were mad. So by our first meeting at Cornerstone Community Church in October of last year, there were 40-some members who still attended that meeting. I almost think that the fact that our membership has dwindled, or the attendance at our meetings has dwindled, is because we've done a lot already in our short history to quell some of the problems. One of the biggest being that we serve actively on the school advisory council here, and we chose American Paradigm to run this school. In the first week of school, we've already seen a change in the behavior and the attitude and the negativism of the kids that walk down the street. They're now talking about their teachers in a positive way as they walk home from school. They're engaged with each other. They're all in uniform, and I might have some personal issues with some of the uniform, or they get a block away from the school and the shirt gets untucked and the pants get dragged down or whatever, but they know how they have to look and behave in here. So we're already starting to change some of that behavior. So I'm proud of Port Richmond West Community Action Network and our one-year track record that we've done some great stuff. Barbara lives over on Clementine Street, and we could walk down Clementine Street and just do Urban Blight 101. I walked down Barbara Street, and there was a house there that was falling down, had a ghetto palm tree growing out of the middle of it, an ailanthus tree, the original tree that grows in Brooklyn. And I called L&I, and they said that house isn't there. It was torn down last year. Barbara told me that when they were out to see her last year, they told her that within 30 days it would be torn down, and here it was nearly a year later. That building had been identified as dangerous and imminent collapse. I mean, I'm not saying the front of the house was falling down. This house was split sideways in a V shape with the tree growing out of the middle of it. And number one, there's also a vacant lot next door to it, which L&I said didn't exist. So I started saying, like, good, then I want to get, I mean, this was all about the time of Occupy Philadelphia at the same time. And I was putting stuff on Facebook at that time saying, come occupy Port Richmond, because there are properties here that L&I doesn't even know exist. And that's what I want. I want a lot that L&I doesn't even know exists because it's not in the tax records. I'll build a house there and I'll live there scot-free for the rest of my life. This house was down, according to them, and the vacant lot next door didn't exist. So 311 failed, whatever the city does failed. We had to reach out to the actual commissioner then of L&I, Fran Burns, to get that house torn down. And what happened, Barbara? It was down in a day?
Really?
Next day.
Wow,
right. The other thing was that also on that street there were a variety of folks doing whatever they wanted with their homes, doing things that are just not, and at the same time Act 90 had just passed, which under Act 90 you must have working doors and windows on a property even if it's not occupied. So they came down that street and I think they cited something like 15 houses, and it's not a very big street and there's not a lot of houses on it. So again, Clementine Street could be a study in what not to do in community development, but we stepped in there and did some things and then started something. They sealed a vacant house, but they sealed it with the trash in it, even though a clean and seal order was issued. And their reason for saying that they didn't clean it was that they couldn't access the property from the back of the property. It didn't have a front door, it didn't have front windows, and the trash was sitting right there. They did the easiest thing. They pulled up and they just boarded it up. We're still working on getting that addressed because that now means unboarding a property, cleaning the trash out, and then reboarding it, and they don't want to pay for that twice. Isn't that a shame? So we've done some things, and we're still pushing on to do some more, and we want this to be the recognized community organization for Port Richmond. There are several organizations here, and they all do a great job at what they do. We chose west of Aramingo Avenue because that area was most neglected and most blighted. And just like they want to change the behavior of the students at the school here, we want to stop the stem the flow of blight from west, or from east to west. Or west to east, actually, because we go to Frankfort Avenue, and it seems like from Frankfort Avenue to what we call either Trenton Avenue, Martha Street, the Black Bridge, the Conrail tracks, and the Conrail area is the most blighted area of this neighborhood, and we can't seem to do anything with it. We've got Reading Viaduct in the Chinatown Center City area, and, you know, I mean, that's hipster heaven, but we can't seem to get that done here, and there are acres and acres of vacant Conrail land here that just stop this neighborhood from getting recognized. And when we did a walking tour with the commissioner in December of last year, it was a bright, sunshiny day on this side of the Conrail tracks. When you live back there, you literally don't see the sunshine until well afternoon when the sun is higher in the sky. It's so depressing to live in the shadow of that junk that that the mood matches how the residents feel and live and act.
It's like a real monster. It's like somebody's protecting them. No one can say anything, but there could be jobs for the community too.
All right. Angela Torino is here from New Kensington Community Development Corporation down the road a little bit, the other side of Lehigh, south of Lehigh Avenue. We had worked previously with Kevin Musselman, and they had the CANAC office, Kensington Area Neighborhood Advisory Committee, which is now not here anymore, but the CDC's boundaries go as far as Frankfort Creek. So we're looking forward to working with Angela and with New Kensington to address some of the Conrail problems. They've done some good stuff in their area with the Lehigh Viaduct, and we're hoping to continue that relationship. As you say, Tracy, I'm concerned all the time that there's this vacant siding near us and they park trains up there. And hey, I've trespassed. It's public land or whatever. I've trespassed. I go up there. They have things like sulfur dioxide, liquid ammonium chloride. And kids who go to this school play on those tracks. And I did encounter a Norfolk Southern police officer one day who gave me a bunch of grief about trespassing. And I said, well, you guys are trespassing in our neighborhood. Why are you parking trains here when you have a yard at Frankfort Avenue and Wheatsheaf Lane? And he told me, it's none of my business because I don't work for the railroad.
Something happens, how will we know what to do?
As it stands right now, a leak on any of those cars dripping down off the trestle into our streets or whatever, and it could be, sulfur dioxide dripping down and the tar is just melting away, and we'll call our fire department. Call 911 to give you fire board. And then you know what fire board does? Put you on hold while they call Conrail and Chemtrek because they have to identify what that chemical is, and they're in charge of the hazardous spill. So meantime, all this time is elapsing, so you're absolutely right. We have no idea, and I hope to use things like right to know and whatever to get to what's at the bottom of that, and ultimately to hold them accountable. So we're about accountability. I have some extras of our flyers, but if you've gotten one, our motto is be good or be gone. And we feel the same way about blighted property owners, Conrail, businesses, this school, or whatever. If this school doesn't make a change in this school, in this community in 3 years, we'll say bye and choose another charter operator. Be good or be gone. Do your job, do it well, or get the heck out of Dodge. That's the way we do things. With that being said, a lot has been talked about recently. I'm excited about tonight's meeting and discussed it at the same time that these seats aren't full. We're talking about voter ID. We're talking about folks taking your basic right to vote away from you if you don't apply for a voting ID or have the right ID when you come to the polls. So we've invited the Committee of 70, and Tracy Gordon is with Stephanie Singer's office. Stephanie Singer is the city commissioner. They watch over our elections and make sure that our elections are safe and fair and good. Committee of 70 has done that also for years and years. And their executive director, who I bond with because he's a former journalist with the Daily News. I want to turn it over to Tracy first. Tracy Gordon from the city commissioner's office to talk about our elections.
Yes, good evening. I'm happy that y'all came out, and this is like most of the meetings, a lot of the meetings I go to is a little bit of people, but a little bit of people, y'all call 5 people and promise, and ask them to promise to call 5 people. That should help. Also, I'm from Southwest Philadelphia, and we're going through similar problems with quality of life issues. And it's just a shame because like a lot of us can't afford to move out of our community, and a lot of us don't want to move out of our communities. But it's a shame that we have to fight for negligent homeowners or nuisances, nuisance bars, nuisance stop and go, and nuisance people. And I love your motto, be good or be gone. I love that motto. So if anything I can do to help, I am a 311 liaison, and any one of you can be a 311 liaison if you had the time. And I'm sure you'll tell them how they can be one. So first of all, so basically Luke and I is going to say most of the same things. He's brilliant. I work with him on a coalition. And so what they're saying now is that when you come to the polls, you have to show a certain type of ID. Mainly or namely, the most type of IDs we have is a driver's license or a non-driver's license. And if you don't have that or any type of license, you would have to get what they call a free voter's ID license. It looks like a non-driver's license, but in bold red, little bold red letters, it says for voting purposes only. And that starts November the 6th. However, if you don't have the ID, which we hope we're trying to get everybody, but if you run into somebody on November the 6th and their excuse is they're not voting because they don't have the proper ID, tell them that they can go and vote anyway. We'll give them a provisional ballot, or if you don't remember the word provisional, remember P, and it's a paper ballot, and they can vote like that. So here's some of the misconceptions that I'm gonna give, and then Luke, I'll let him go over the technicalities about, you know, how and where you get the IDs, because, you know, the state is saying that they're lapsing, and he can go more in detail about the Supreme Court decision to send it back to the judge so he can make a decision by October the 2nd. In the meantime, time is running out. Some of the misconceptions that people are coming to our office on a daily basis is the name. And substantially conform. People are coming and say, well, my name on my driver's license says Tracy L. Gordon. And I didn't put Tracy L. Gordon when I registered to vote. I just put Tracy Gordon. That works. T.L. Gordon works. Tracy Gordon works. Tracy L. Gordon works. Tracy Lynette Gordon works. So long as it substantially conforms, it's not Tracy Woods, then that's a problem, okay? Whether or not the judge of elections, we're trying to train them, but one thing I want you all to remember, there's one website, and he'll give you his website too, but his is good as well. It's called votes, VOTESPA.com. I want you all to go on that website and study it as much as you can. But one of the most important booklets that if you needed to study is go into the resource, hit the resource button, and go down, scroll down, and it's going to say poll worker training. So when you hit that link, is a audio, visual, somebody, but it's also a book. Study that book. Because when you study what the poll worker is supposed to do, then you'll be more educated as to what they expect of you. Because this poll worker's book is telling the poll workers what they are to ask for. Plus, it gives you samples. The booklet is awesome. It gives you samples of the types of IDs. One of the major misconceptions that's going on in the community is addresses. They are not comparing addresses to what's on the poll workers or to the poll. They are saying your name, the specific ID, a passport, a driver's license, non-driver's license, the free voter ID, accredited Pennsylvania college ID, and an expiration date. Those three things. So people are saying, oh, I got to change my, they're not looking at addresses. Unless if it's the first time you ever voted there, they're going to ask you to just pay a piece of mail. You can go on the Committee of 70 Works website, and I'm sure he has cards and brochures. It's 70.org, right? The word 70, not the number, 70.org. Click that on, and then it's going to be a menu, and you're going to say, am I registered to vote? You can click that on. You put your name in there. Your date of birth, it'll tell you. Say, where do I go vote? Where's my polling place? Click that on. Then you type your address in, and it tells you, not only does it tell you where your polling place is, it tells you who all your elected officials is and gives you all their telephone numbers. Okay, that's another website. Another website, I love this website because it's a national database. It's called canivote.org, and that's CANIVOTE.org. So you go on there, you click the state. So your mother, she's from Florida, and she don't know if she's registered to vote. Click on Florida, type her name and her date of birth, and it will tell her nationwide. Now here's the clincher that sometimes people make mistakes, or when you go down to PennDOT, they may say you're not in. So you call my office, 215, and I have cards for everyone, 686-3460 or 3461. Hello, I need to know if I'm registered to vote. So if you go in there, maybe the person that put the data in spelled Mary, M-A-R-R-Y, instead of M-A-R-Y. So when you go in there and say, let me see if I'm registered to vote, and you put how your name is spelled, and you click it, it says, no, you're not, but you're really registered because they messed up over on your date of birth or something. So it's easy to call us because then we can go and say, well, what's your address? What's your date of birth? And then we can see the whole database in the SURE system. But what I'm trying to tell you all is you can be empowered. You could be the resource for your neighborhood. And I'm saying that each person in here tell 5 other people this, even if they don't want to listen, because it magnifies. And then you tell them to tell 5. So I just ran off the the websites, but they're real simple, and then I have it written down, and then you can always call our office and visit us in room 130 if you need bilingual help, City Hall room 130, and we go above and beyond. We have one lady, her name is Nori Gonzalez, she's bilingual, and she's like helping people get their birth certificates. It's like in us, like it's infectious, you know? I don't know why we're like that, but I think we're born like that, but we go above and beyond because this is very important. There are certain consequences when people don't vote. In other words, in the last election, less than 20% of Philadelphians, registered Philadelphians, came out to vote. In other words, if this city was populated by 100 people, 20 people decide for 100 people. That's very dangerous because we're nonpartisan. So I'm like this. I just want you to vote. I can't. It's not my right to tell you to vote one way or the other. I think that's your own conscience, and that's if you do. But here's an example of consequences. Okay. Now the governor that passed this bill, when he ran for office, he won by 373 some odd votes. 500,000 eligible Philadelphians chose not to come out. If people in Philadelphia came out more to vote, we could control state politics. So things like general assistance. Now, some people in general assistance, just like in everything, people try to get over on the system. Rich people do too. So don't just think poor people is crooked. Rich people are too. But it's some people that's got that general assistance that actually really need that general assistance. It was $100 every 2 weeks. They were paying their rent. They had to get Clorox, the bleach. They had to wash their clothes, etc. Everybody that got their money wasn't going to get drugs. So I'm just saying there's consequences for when Philadelphians don't come. When your neighbor, when your child, when your aunt, when your mother say, my vote don't count, whether they think it counts or not, election is going to happen twice a year. Elected officials are going to be elected, and decisions are going to be made over your life, whether you like it or not. So you might as well get in the game, because this is the game to be in, because you live in a democracy. People in other countries are dying to get over here. We are sending our children over there to fight for our right to have free public schools, to have free health care, et cetera, et cetera. And if you don't get in the game of exercising your right, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I'm trying to give you tools and responses to give to people when they just simply think that their vote don't count. So remember, the most important thing, also, here's another thing. Because we live in transient neighborhoods, I know Southwest Philly is a transient, and when I mean transient, like you may get evicted, and the last thing on your mind when you move or have to be displaced and move in another part of town is, woo, let me get a voter's registration card. That is the last thing on your mind. And the only reason why voters' registration cards is flying in your face now is because there's a lot of money. Is a presidential election. But I'm going to tell you, presidents don't cut general assistance. Politics is local. Right. Politics is local. And that's the things, them local elections, the judge that made the decision to make this voter ID law, and it went back to him, 2001, hardly nobody came out. People don't think judges are important. Judges are important. The person that's going to enforce this law, if this law sustains, is the state attorney general. Right under the president of the United States, this year, the state attorney general is running for office. Now, how important is that? How important is that person who gets in the office, or whatever party that person is? Because, it always overlaps, even though it don't supposed to. Here's what I'm trying to say. For instance, if your sister or your daughter, she was evicted, she moved from Kensington, and now she lives in North Philly, she does not have tokens to get all the way back to Kensington. In Philadelphia or wherever, if you're registered, you can vote in any polling place. You don't have to go to the polling place where you're registered. You can go in any polling place. Here's the deal. You have to ask for a provisional ballot. The paper ballot that I said, if you didn't have your ID, You go in there, the judge is not going to say, oh, you're registered. It doesn't matter. Who determines whether or not you're registered and whether or not that ballot is going to count is the commission. And you can always call back to us and say, did my vote count? Okay, so if you know people that work and don't get off till 9 o'clock and the polling place closes at 8 o'clock, you tell them during that lunch break, go out there, find out where their nearest polling place is, because they are all over the city. Go in there, ask for a provisional ballot, and their vote will count. We need all the votes. We need people to vote. We need people to vote twice a year, every year. Because politicians care about two things, and this is my opinion: money and votes. That's it. And I keep telling everybody, being that the kids are out of school, bring little Johnny, bring little Susan with you. Come on, make it like a family affair. One person can go in that curtain with you. Always remember that, one person. And teach her so she can get used to it, because the kids nowadays, they aren't used to it, and they're not used to it. I just actually, because I'm like a news junkie, I love this country. I see what's going on with women and men in other countries. I'm not saying we're perfect. I don't think no one is. But if you look at some of those other countries, how they're being abused, they're working for pennies or whatever, our country could turn back into that if we give up this privilege of voting to be able to ship them in or ship them out. Now, here's how politicians do. Anything free, people will come. We get some free fruit baskets or something, because this is important. You go up to a politician and you say, hey, Mr. Politician, how are you? How are you doing? They look and they just say a number 1 on your head, right? So they're just looking at you and they're like, please, I don't even be. When he comes up to them, they look at, wait a minute, he got like 100 people on his head. So when you go as a group, as a block, you bring more people. So when you see them, hi. So they only looking at numbers or how much money you can donate. I'm sorry it's come down to this, and I'm not judging all elected officials like that, but I'm calling it as I see it. So I wanted to thank you all. I'm going to give everybody in here my card. We're looking for poll workers. If you're bilingual, we're looking for people that are interpreters. And if you need us to come to any of your other community meetings, we'll be glad to come out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracy, and I'll see you on Facebook later on this evening, or if not tomorrow. I will have all those websites up. Thank you all. Give yourselves a round of applause for tolerating me. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you and another friend next month.